Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're actually stepping away from the bright, clear-cut facts of everyday life, and we're moving into the shadows. We're going to explore a true story that honestly defies logic and challenges literally everything we think we know about human connection. It's the haunting psychological tragedy of June and Jennifer Gibbons. You probably know them as the Silent Twins. Today, we're tracing a deeply unsettling path, from a pact of complete, unbreakable isolation to a trail of fire, and ultimately, a devastating sacrifice.
So what actually happens when a bond becomes too strong? For most of us, human connection is a lifeline, right? It's what keeps us grounded in reality, helps us learn, allows us to grow. But I want you to consider the inverse today. What if a connection becomes so all-encompassing, so entirely consuming that it completely severs all ties to the outside world? What if a relationship gets so intertwined that it actually demands the ultimate price just to break free from it? Keep that thought in the back of your mind as we unravel the breadcrumbs of their really tragic fate. Okay, let's dive into this with part 1, A World of Two. To really grasp the magnitude of what happens later, we absolutely have to start at the foundation of their lives. Born in the 1960s, June and Jennifer grew up completely, and I mean entirely, cut off from the rest of society. They didn't just happen to be shy or introverted. No, this was a profound, active withdrawal. They systematically engineered this microscopic universe where the population was strictly capped at exactly 2. Everyone and everything else was simply locked out. And how did they maintain that perfect, undisturbed isolation? Well, through a private language. This wasn't your typical fleeting twin speak that kids eventually outgrow. Not at all. They communicated in a highly idiosyncratic, sped-up version of Bayesian Creole that absolutely no one else, not even their own parents, could decode. Think about it. If you can't understand someone, you can't interact with them. By speaking in a way no one else could decipher, they essentially built an invisible acoustic wall around themselves, effectively trapping themselves inside. And this brilliantly illustrates the extreme split they lived with. On one side, you had the objective outside world, school, family, normal socialization, which they adamantly, completely refused to acknowledge. And on the other side, an incredibly rich, incredibly dark, imaginary reality that they built entirely internally. Because they weren't participating in the real world, literally all their creative energy, all their emotional development poured directly into the shared fantasy space. It's a really striking reminder of the extreme tension between a mind completely detached from reality and the physical world it just fiercely refuses to engage with. Moving right along to part 2, Toxic Escalation and Crime. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because isolation of this magnitude, it rarely stays static or peaceful. Born into that complete isolation in the 1960s, their tightly sealed bubble really started to warp as they reached their teenage years. The dynamic between them aged into something incredibly volatile. Their mutual dependency didn't mature into, say, healthy support. Instead, that twin bond turned dangerously poisonous. It basically trapped them in an echo chamber of their own making where they just fed off each other's darkest thoughts. And finally, reaching their late teens, they hit a breaking point, a shocking descent into actual criminal activity. The imaginary darkness had officially breached the real world. So the crucial point here is how this impenetrable bond manifested. It didn't lead to some quiet, peaceful life. It actually incubated a genuine threat. Their total isolation from society evolved into escalating criminal activity, eventually boiling over into tangible acts of destructive arson. They literally began burning down buildings in their community. They were lashing out at a world they refused to join, acting on these dangerous impulses that they'd cultivated inside their closed loop. These acts of destruction were so severe, in fact, that it ultimately led to their institutionalization at Broadmoor Hospital. That's a high-security psychiatric facility, where they were closely monitored by journalist Marjorie Wallace. And actually, she's the one who later brought their chilling story to light. Now we reach the incredibly somber climax of their story. Part 3, The Deadly Pact. Now, what's really interesting and honestly terrifying about this slide is the paradox of their agreement. The consequences of their downward spiral had reached an absolute apex. Even the twins themselves seemed to realize that their dynamic was entirely unsustainable. They had backed themselves into a psychological corner, right? And from there was only one horrifying exit strategy. Their codependency had become so suffocating that they believed a normal existence was mathematically impossible as long as both of them were alive. To escape the invisible prison they built together, one twin literally had to sacrifice her life. One life was the exact calculated currency required to purchase the other's freedom. It's just devastating.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought. Are there corners of human psychology too dark to fully understand? You know, the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons isn't your traditional missing person mystery. Nobody was physically lost, yet they were entirely unreachable. It stands as a haunting psychological tragedy. It forces us to confront the extreme limits of the human mind and the devastating power of a completely severed reality. Thank you so much for engaging with this really challenging material today. Let this story be a powerful reminder of the delicate, absolutely crucial balance between human connection and individual identity. Keep questioning and keep learning.